Mr. Chairman, I am honored to be here. I'd like to express my appreciation to you and to the committee offering me a screen to protect my identity and to enhance my security. Good security is always a very good idea, and if this were normal circumstances, I would accept your offer. The work of this committee and this hearing is just too important. I don't want to be just a voice behind a screen. When I speak, I think the American people need to look into my face, and I want to look the American people in the eye. My name is Cofer Black. I'm a case officer of the Directorate of Operations of the Central Intelligence Agency. I served as the director of the Counterterrorism Center from the 29th of July 1999 until May 2002. Mr. Chairman, I hope that these proceedings provide the relatives and their loved ones of those lost in the horrific act of 9/11 the information that they're seeking. But we are meeting here today because of the loss of over 3,000 innocents. We provided strategic warning. Our intense efforts were unable to provide tactical warning on 9/11. We all share a profound and horrible sense of loss. Everything we do in this global war and the very real risks that we take have only one objective, and that's to defend America and to defend innocence. In this long fight, my CIA colleagues operating with me in Khartoum, Sudan in 1995 preempted preparations of Osama bin Laden's thugs to kill me. 6 years later, Osama bin Laden and his Al-Qaeda are the killers of 9/11. You need to appreciate fully three factors. There were choices made for us. These choices were made for the Central Intelligence Agency, and they were made for the Counterterrorism Center. These involve the numbers of people, money, and operational flexibility. I'd like to talk about people for a minute. Before 9/11, the CIA Counterterrorism Center had as many people as maybe 3 Army infantry companies. 3 infantry companies can be expected to cover a front of a few kilometers. Our Counterterrorism Center is responsible for the entire world and all the terrorist threats. It was not only Al-Qaeda that we engaged. Until 9/11, Hezbollah had killed more Americans than any other terrorist group. Hezbollah is also our responsibility, as are all the others. We work through the Directorate of Operations, which is deployed overseas. The head of the Operations Directorate will tell you, Mr. Chairman, that at the end of the 1990s, he had 25% less covert operations officers than he had at the beginning. The Director of Central Intelligence, George Tenet, did all that he could to help us out. We, of all his interests, had the highest priority. Prior to my arrival, there had been a substantial increase in our personnel. We still struggled. While all the other operating components were being cut, the Counterterrorism Center received what small increases were available. My second point, cash. This is what we used to pay for operations. At the beginning of each of my 3 fiscal years as chief, the Counterterrorism Center had enough money to purchase about 2 modern jet fighter aircraft. When I became the chief in 1999, I had a physical reality. We had less money to support operations than we had the year before. As a result, I cut all of my subordinate units, except for one, more than 30%. We survived because of the Director of Central Intelligence's support and the supplemental fundings that we received. My third point, operational flexibility. This is a very highly classified area, but I have to say that all you need to know is that there was a before 9/11 and there was an after 9/11. After 9/11, the gloves come off. Nearly 3,000 al-Qaeda and their supporters have been arrested or detained. In Afghanistan, the al-Qaeda who refused to surrender have been killed. The hunt is on. At your hearing last Friday, my colleague, referred to only as CIA officer behind the screen, was a witness before you and spoke. I think the significant point that he raised was an unprepared remark saying that he was overwhelmed. He was overwhelmed by limitless work, and he was overwhelmed by a lack of resources. Perhaps now we can say why he said this instinctively. However, even a fully staffed and supported intelligence effort will not provide comprehensive 100% defense. We must constantly intensify our offensive while at the same time supporting law enforcement and its work.
Born in Stamford, Connecticut, Joseph Cofer Black grew up in Levittown, New York during the period between 1950 to 1969. While taking periodic trips with his father throughout parts of Africa, all the while he completed his courses at the University of Southern California in 1974 while majoring in international relations. In 1975, he would formally join the Central Intelligence Agency. While at the CIA, Black trained at the clandestine services and volunteered for Africa due to his childhood experiences there with his father. During his CIA career, Black served 6 foreign tours in field management positions. His former trips with his father to such places as Angola, Sudan, and Congo would come as a valuable asset as he knew the geography well enough. In 1993, Black transferred from London, England to Khartoum, Sudan, where he served as the CIA station chief until 1995. This was a low point at the United States-Sudanese relations, particularly over the later country's sponsorship of terror and the harboring of al-Qaeda founder Osama bin Laden. Black oversaw the collection of human intelligence on terrorist cells and support structures, and toward the end of his tenure, he was targeted by al-Qaeda for assassination. Black was also responsible for the collection of intelligence that directly led to the 1994 capture of the terrorist known as Carlos the Jackal. He was a member of a 4-man CIA team dispatched to Khartoum to check on a tip that Carlos had gone underground there with a young Jordanian bride named Lana. Sudanese officials gave Carlos refuge with the understanding he would forego further terrorist acts. Along with a 4-man team, Black would help assist in the capture of the elusive terrorist. June 1999, George Tenet, the director of the CIA, had named Cofer Black head of the CIA's Counterintelligence Center. By this time, there was a new jackal who terrorized the world, Osama bin Laden. And in 1998, he issued his second fatwa against the United States by declaring all Muslims to kill Americans wherever you find them. Tenet directed a new organization that would specialize in capturing the ghost of Afghanistan, the Bin Laden Issue Station. And by 1999, earlier, and then later in that year, it had 15 operatives from numerous agencies working within its confines, sharing metadata and human intelligence as well as signals intelligence, and comparing the meticulous data in capturing as many al-Qaeda operatives as they could find. The Counterterrorism Center had produced a comprehensive plan of attack against bin Laden and previewed the new strategy to senior CIA management by the end of July. By mid-September, it had briefed the CIA operational level and to the NSA and the FBI, all who were part of Alex Station, and other partners. The strategy was simply called the plan. The plan called for a Black and his new bin Laden unit that wanted to project into Afghanistan to penetrate bin Laden's sanctuaries. They described their plan as military officers might. They sought to surround Afghanistan with secure covert bases for CIA operations, as many bases as they could arrange. Then they would mount operations from each of the platforms, trying to move inside Afghanistan and as close to bin Laden as they could to recruit agents and to attempt capture operations. Black wanted recruitments, and he wanted to develop commando or paramilitary strike teams made up of officers and men who could blend into the region's Muslim populations. Parallel with the developments in November and December of 1999, Muhammad Atta, Marwan al-Shehi, Ziad Jarrah, and Nawaf al-Hazmi had visited Afghanistan, where they were selected for the planes operation that was to become known as the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001. Working with a Malaysian security unit, the CIA watched Nawaf al-Hazmi and his companion Khalid al-Midar as they attended a January 2000 al-Qaeda conference in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, later determined to be where discussions about the planes operations were made. Quote, "We surveilled them. We surveilled the guy that's there to meet," Black had recalled. "Not close enough to hear what they were saying, but we're covering, taking pictures, watching their behavior. They're acting kind of spooky. They're not using the phone in the apartment. They're going around, walking in circles, just like junior spies, going up to phone booths, making a lot of calls. It's like, who are these dudes?" End quote. According to an internal CIA report on the performance of the agency prior to the 9/11 attacks, Black was criticized for not passing on information to the FBI that al-Hazmi and al-Midar had subsequently entered the United States. In addition, the 9/11 Commission found that while Black testified before Congress's joint inquiry into 9/11 that the FBI had access to information on the two hijackers, the 9/11 Commission found no such evidence of this. The CIA increasingly concentrated its diminished resources on counterterrorism so that resources for this particular activity increased sharply. At least some of the plan's more modest aspirations were translated into action. Intelligence collection efforts on bin Laden and al-Qaeda increased significantly from 1999 to 2000. By 9/11, said George Tenet, a map would show that these collection programs and human reporting networks were in place in such numbers as to nearly cover Afghanistan. The CIA decides to increase its links with Ahmad Shah Massoud, an Afghan commander fighting the Taliban in the Northern Alliance. The decision is pushed through by Cofer Black. According to author Steve Cole, it was Cofer Black and Richard Blee, head of the Bin Laden Issue Station, that see Massoud, as his admirers in Europe do, an epochal figure, extraordinarily skillful and determined, and believe that Massoud is the key to capturing bin Laden. However, the CIA's Near East Division is skeptical of the potential for this liaison, partly because they remember problems they had with Massoud during the Soviet-Afghan War. The Near East officers who think Massoud can only be of limited usefulness against bin Laden because of his geographical distance between Massoud's forces in the north of Afghanistan and bin Laden's base in the country's south, along with the Taliban. During the dawn of a new century, it was Black who remained optimistic in capturing bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri. An important meeting was taking place, and it was to discuss whether to share any information with the FBI. They chose not to. Even though the details of the meeting between the al-Qaeda operatives at Malaysia, the notion is that here they were discussing the bombing of the USS Cole and discussed the plane's operation. Khalid al-Midar would later report back to al-Qaeda that he thought he was being followed inside the United States. It will not be reported whether any of the other attendees are monitored after leaving the meeting. Meanwhile, the State Department under then U.S. President Bill Clinton authorized numerous times for the CIA to capture, not kill, the infamous figure of bin Laden, but the convoluted details of who would be sent and the course of action would be limited in its scope by those in the White House. To show how complacent those in the White House have become over what to do with the intel given by the CIA on bin Laden's whereabouts, we go to the 9/11 Commission Report, Chapter 4, page 1 to 33. Quote, early in 1999, the CIA received reporting that bin Laden was spending much of his time at one of the several camps in the Afghan desert south of Kandahar. At the beginning of February, bin Laden was reportedly located in the vicinity of the Sheikh Ali camp, a desert hunting camp being used by visitors from a Gulf state. Public sources have stated that these visitors were from the United Arab Emirates. Reporting from the CIA's assets provided a detailed description of the hunting camp, including its size, location, resources, and security, as well as of bin Laden's smaller adjacent camp. Because this was not in an urban area, missiles launched against it would have less risk of causing collateral damage. On February 6th, the military began to ready itself for a possible strike, end quote. The next day, National Technical Intelligence confirmed the location and description of the larger camp and showed the nearby presence of an official aircraft of the United Arab Emirates. But the location of bin Laden's quarters could not be pinned down so precisely. The CIA did its best to answer a host of questions about the larger camp and its residents and about bin Laden's daily schedule and routines to support military contingency planning. According to reporting from the tribals, bin Laden regularly went from his adjacent camp to the larger camp where he visited the Emiratis. The tribals expected him to be at the hunting camp for such a visit at least until mid-morning on February 11th. However, no strike was launched, and bin Laden was lucky. On February 12th, the next day, bin Laden had apparently moved on, and the immediate strike plans became moot. According to CIA and defense officials, policymakers were concerned about the danger that a strike would kill an Emirati prince or other senior officials who might be with bin Laden or close by. The lead CIA official in the field, Gary Sharon, felt that the intelligence reporting in the case was very reliable. So did Cofer Black. The bin Laden unit chief, Mike, agreed. Sharon believes today that this was a lost opportunity to kill bin Laden before 9/11. On October 12, 2000, the USS Cole is bombed at the port of Aden, Yemen. Following the attack on the USS Cole, the CIA discusses possible policy changes in the hunt for Osama bin Laden. Disappointed by U.S. inaction, Alex Station Chief Richard Blee, along with Counterterrorism Center's lead head, Cofer Black, decides we've got to change the rules because he thinks Al-Qaeda is getting stronger and stronger. This entails enhanced support for the Northern Alliance led by Ahmed Shah Massoud, which is the only credible opposition fighting the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. National Security Advisor Sandy Berger would ask CIA Director Tenet how he would go after Al-Qaeda if he was unconstrained by resources and policies. Tenet assigns Cofer Black and the CIA's Counterterrorism Center to develop a plan for the incoming Bush administration. It is dubbed the Blue Sky Memo. The CIA presents it to Counterterrorism Czar Richard Clarke on December 29, 2000. It recommends increased support to anti-Taliban groups and especially a major effort to back Massoud's Northern Alliance to tie down Al-Qaeda personnel before they leave Afghanistan. However, no action is taken on it, and the last few weeks of the Clinton administration and the new Bush administration, however, did not appear interested in it either. Since early 2000, the CIA and the NSA would know that two high-valued Al-Qaeda operatives were inside the United States and living openly, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wafa Hazmi, although they would never notify the FBI or the State Department with this important information. In April of 2001, Cofer Black, in an act of sheer premonition, stated in front of a military class at the National War College at Fort Leslie, Washington, D.C., Black would go on to say, something big is coming, and that it is very likely it could be in the U.S. He says he will get blamed for the incident and that he had his resignation already signed in his drawer and ready to pull out when it happened. Throughout the year, numerous CIA agents would hold meetings along with numerous high-level CIA officers with White House officials to complete assurances that Al-Qaeda was determined to strike inside the United States. On August 6, 2001, the presidential daily brief was simple, but brief and direct. Bin Laden was determined to strike inside the United States, with information emanating from Alex Station Chief Richard Blee rushing out his office door about how high-level American targets were being selected for attack. The CIA meeting briefed U.S. President Bush, along with Condoleezza Rice and Richard Clarke, without George Tenet present. September 11, 2001. The United States is under attack from 4 planes hijacked, which slammed into the World Trade Center and to the Pentagon, while one crashed in a former minefield in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The very next day, CIA Director George Tenet and Cofer Black meet at 9:30 a.m. in the White House Situation Room with President Bush and members of the National Security Council. Tenet presents a plan for tracking down Osama bin Laden, toppling the Taliban in Afghanistan, and confronting terrorism worldwide. On September 19th, it was Black who ordered Gary Bernstein, who was about to lead the first CIA operation in Afghanistan, he would tell Bernstein, "You have one mission. Go find the Al-Qaeda and kill them. We're going to eliminate them. Get bin Laden, find him. I want his head in a box. I want to take it down and show to the president." But months later, after the raging war against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, the noticeable failure of not finding much, less killing bin Laden, haunts the staunch Cofer Black. Later, the Washington Post will report, quote, "The Bush administration has concluded that Osama bin Laden was present during the Battle of Tora Bora late last year, and that the failure to commit U.S. ground troops to hunt him was the gravest error in the war against Al-Qaeda," end quote. The very next day, when bin Laden escaped into Pakistan, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had denied this and stated he did not know at the time of the assault that, "Nor do I know today of any evidence that he was in Tora Bora at the time or that he left Tora Bora at the time or even where he is today." This would lead to Cofer Black's unforeseen firing from his position as the director of the CTC. Rumsfeld had asserted it was Black himself who leaked the information to the Washington Post. And that was because the State Department definitely knew that Osama bin Laden was in Tora Bora, because the name of the CIA operation in chasing him was Jawbreaker, headed by Gary Bernstein. During his 2002 joint inquiry testimonial 9/11 hearing, Cofer Black defended his torture policies of Al-Qaeda operatives, including Abu Zubaydah. He confided to the committee that after 9/11, the gloves came off, and to get pertinent information, he used enhanced interrogation techniques such as waterboarding to extract information. He then proceeds to tell staffers of the committee that the CIA didn't fail the American citizenry, and that proper funding was one of the many problems the CIA faced, as well as a lack of manpower. In sworn testimony to the 9/11 congressional inquiry, CIA Director George Tenet repeatedly claimed that a March 2000 cable sent to CIA headquarters reporting that hijackers Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar had entered the U.S. was not read by anybody. Tenet would go on to say, "I know that nobody read that cable. Nobody read that cable in the March timeframe. Nobody read it because that cable was information only." However, former Counterterrorism Center Cofer Black will also claim that the cable was not read. Incidentally, it was. However, a later investigation by the CIA Office of Inspector General will find that numerous CIA officers, over 50, had actually read the cable shortly after it was sent to Alex Station. The question remains, why was it not shared with the FBI or the State Department? Cofer Black was a former vice chairman of Blackwater between the years 2005 and 8. He resigned in 2008 after learning about Blackwater's illegal payments to Iraqi officials. After 26 years of service to the CIA, Cofer Black today now works in the private sector.